The stars above New Avalon were peaceful that morning. 3 million humans lived on the green and fertile world below, most of them farmers and their families. They had left Earth 2 generations ago to build a quiet life among the stars. They grew wheat and corn and raised cattle under an alien sun. They built small towns with schools and churches. They wanted nothing more than to live in peace. They did not know that death was coming for them. Far beyond their planet, hidden in the darkness between stars, the Dominion had gathered its war fleet. 200 warships hung in formation like a swarm of hungry insects. Their hulls were dark purple and covered in sharp angles. Their weapons were charged and ready. Their crews were eager for conquest. Fleet Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide. He was tall with gray skin and 4 eyes that gleamed with cold intelligence. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career. New Avalon would be his 13th. "Status report," he commanded. Sub-Commander stepped forward. She was younger than, with lighter skin and nervous hands that she kept clasped behind her back. "All ships report ready, Admiral. We will reach the human colony in 6 hours. Allowed himself a thin smile. The humans have no military presence in this sector, no warships, no defense stations, just farmers and their families. He turned to look at the star map floating before him. "This will be easy." "Should we expect any resistance at all?" asked. "Perhaps a few patrol ships, nothing that can stand against 200 warships," waved his hand dismissively. "The humans spread themselves too thin. They try to protect too many worlds with too few ships. It is their weakness and we will exploit it." Across the vast distance of space, on the colony world below, Governor Maria Santos received the warning that changed everything. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent 20 years building New Avalon into a thriving colony. Now she stared at her communication screen with growing horror. 200 ships, she whispered. "Are you certain?" The face on the screen belonged to an intelligence officer back on Earth. He looked grim. "Long-range sensors confirmed it, Governor. The fleet will reach your system in approximately 6 hours. We are scrambling everything we can, but our nearest battle group is 3 days away." 3 days? Maria felt her heart sink. "We will all be dead or enslaved in 3 days." "There is one ship that can reach you in time," the officer said carefully. "Just one, but Command is hesitant to send it alone against such numbers." "One ship? What difference can one ship make?" The officer paused. "It is the Defiance, Governor." Maria Santos had heard stories about the Defiance. Everyone had. It was one of humanity's Titan-class dreadnoughts, a massive vessel built for war. But more than that, it had a reputation. The Defiance had fought in battles across the galaxy. It had never retreated. It had never surrendered. It had become something like a legend. "Send it," Maria said without hesitation. "Send whatever you can." 4 hours later, Captain Daniel Price received his orders aboard the USS Defiance. He was a man in his 50s with short gray hair and calm brown eyes. He had commanded the Defiance for 15 years, and in that time he had seen things that would break lesser men. But his hands never shook, and his voice never wavered. He stood on the bridge surrounded by his crew. Commander Laura Kent, his executive officer, stood at his right side. She was a tall woman with sharp features and red hair pulled back in a tight bun. Lieutenant Chris Warren, young and eager, manned the weapons station. Ensign Bell sat at communications, and Lieutenant Sam handled navigation. "New Avalon," Price said quietly, reading the orders on his screen. 3 million civilians, 6 hours until they arrive. "And we are the only ship that can make it in time," Laura said. It was not a question. 200 enemy warships, Chris Warren said from his station. His voice carried a hint of disbelief. "Sir, those are impossible odds." Price turned to look at his weapons officer. "Lieutenant, do you know how many battles this ship has fought?" 47, sir." "And how many times have we faced impossible odds?" Chris thought about it. "Most of them, sir." And how many times have we failed to protect the people counting on us? There was silence on the bridge. Chris lowered his eyes. Never, sir. Price nodded slowly. Then let us not start today. He turned to his navigation officer. Lieutenant, set course for New Avalon, maximum speed. Course laid in, Captain. All hands, Price said, his voice carrying through the ship's intercom. This is the captain. We are moving to defend the colony of New Avalon against an invasion fleet. The odds are not in our favor. They rarely are. But those colonists are counting on us and we will not let them down. Prepare for combat. Price out. The massive engines of the Defiance roared to life. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, streaking across the galaxy toward a battle that seemed impossible to win. Laura Kent moved closer to her captain. Daniel, she said quietly, using his first name as she only did in private moments. What is the plan? Price stared at the stars blurring past them. They know our ship, Laura. They know our history. We have fought them before and they have long memories. You think they will be afraid? I think fear is a weapon and we have spent 15 years sharpening it. He turned to face her. Sometimes one ship is enough, not because of its guns or its armor, but because of what it represents. The Defiance is more than steel and fire. It is a promise that humanity will never abandon its own. Laura considered this, and if they are not afraid, if they attack anyway. Captain Price's eyes grew hard. Then we will remind them why they should have been. The Defiance raced on through the void, a single point of light against the darkness. Behind it, Earth Command could only watch and hope. Ahead of it, 200 warships waited like wolves around a wounded deer. But the wolves did not yet know what was coming for them. And on New Avalon, 3 million humans looked up at the sky and prayed for a miracle. Their miracle was on its way. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel above New Avalon like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. 200 warships spread across the void in perfect formation. Their weapons powered up with a low hum that their crews could feel in their bones. Victory seemed certain. Fleet Admiral stood tall on his bridge, all 4 of his eyes fixed on the blue and green world below. Begin scanning the system, he ordered. Find their defense stations. Find their patrol ships. Find anything that might delay our conquest. Sub-Commander worked at her console. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls. Then she stopped. Her body went very still. Admiral, she said slowly, I am detecting a ship. Laughed, just one. Destroy it and move on. Sir, you need to see this. Something in her voice made turn. Was staring at her screen with wide eyes. Her gray skin had gone pale, almost white, walked over to her station and looked at the display. A single vessel had positioned itself directly between the fleet and the colony world. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of its flagship. Its hull was covered in battle scars and burn marks from countless engagements. It floated in the void like an old warrior waiting for one more fight. What is this ship? Demanded. His voice came out as barely a whisper. USS Defiance, Titan-class Dreadnought. She swallowed hard. Human. The name meant nothing to at first. Then he noticed the reaction spreading across his bridge. Officers were looking up from their stations. Some were whispering to each other. Fear was spreading like a disease through his crew. I do not understand, growled. It is one ship, we have 200. Admiral said carefully, the Defiance is not just any ship, it has a reputation. Reputation? His 4 eyes narrowed. I do not care about reputation, I care about firepower. One ship cannot defeat 200. But even as he spoke, he could see the doubt on his crew's faces. Something was very wrong. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Daniel Price stood with his hands clasped behind his back. The main showed the massive fleet spread out before them like stars in a deadly constellation. It was an impressive sight. Most commanders would have felt fear at such numbers. Price felt nothing but calm purpose. They have seen us, Bell reported from communications. Multiple ships are scanning our position. Let them look, Price said quietly. Make sure our identification beacon is active. I want them to know exactly who we are. Chris Warren looked up from his weapons station. All weapons charged and ready, Captain. Point defense systems online. Shields at maximum. Very good, Lieutenant, but hold your fire. Laura Kent stepped closer to Price. You think they recognize us? They will. Price allowed himself a small smile. Give it a few minutes. Across the void, on the flagship, panic was beginning to spread. Word had traveled fast through the fleet's communication network. Veterans were sharing stories. Young officers were listening with growing terror. I served on the Blade of Sorrows, one engineer whispered to his. We were part of a 30-ship squadron that encountered the Defiance near the system. 16 ships escaped, 16 out of 30. My father fought against that ship, a weapons officer said, his voice shaking. He was one of 12 survivors from his cruiser. He never spoke of it. Never. He would wake up screaming in the night, but he never told us what happened. Similar conversations were happening across all 200 ships. The name Defiance carried weight that no weapon could match. It was a name that appeared in nightmares. It was a name that mothers used to frighten disobedient children. It was a name that meant death. Fleet Admiral demanded silence on his bridge. Enough of these whispers. It is just a ship. Admiral said quietly, they are hailing us. Straightened his uniform, on screen. The image of Captain Daniel Price appeared before them. He was calm. He was relaxed. He looked almost bored, as if facing 200 warships was just another day at work. This is Captain Daniel Price of the USS Defiance, he said. His voice was steady and cold. The colony of New Avalon is under the protection of Earth. I suggest you turn your fleet around and leave this system immediately. Leaned forward in his chair. You suggest. One ship suggests that 200 warships run away. He forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. You are either very brave or very stupid human. Price did not react to the insult. His expression remained unchanged. I have been called both, Admiral, but I am still here. Many who have faced this ship are not. He paused to let those words sink in. You may leave now, or you may stay and become a lesson for those who come after you. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. Sat in silence for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew watched and waited. He could feel their fear pressing against him like a physical weight. Admiral said softly, "What are your orders?" Before could respond, a message arrived from another part of the fleet. Elder Counselor, a senior advisor who had been assigned to observe the invasion, was requesting an immediate private meeting. His message said it was urgent. It said it concerned the human ship. Felt a cold sensation in his stomach. Was old. He had served in the fleet for over 60 years. If something had scared him enough to request an urgent meeting, then perhaps there was more to this situation than wanted to believe. I will speak with the counselor, announced. All ships hold position. Do not engage the human vessel. He turned to, watch that ship. If it makes any aggressive moves, inform me immediately. Yes, Admiral. Left the bridge and walked toward his private chambers. With each step, he tried to convince himself that this was nothing. One ship could not defeat 200. It was simple mathematics. But somewhere deep in his mind, a voice whispered that mathematics had nothing to do with what was coming. The Defiance floated silently in space, waiting. Its crew stood ready at their stations. Its weapons hummed with deadly potential. And across the void, 200 warships began to remember why they feared humanity. Elder Counselor was waiting in Admiral's private chamber. He was very old, even by standards. His gray skin had faded to almost white, and deep wrinkles covered his face. His 4 eyes had grown cloudy with age, but there was something in those eyes that had never seen before. Fear, pure, undiluted fear. "You wanted to speak with me about the human ship," said as the door closed behind him. "Speak quickly. We have an invasion to conduct." Did not rise from his seat. His hands were trembling slightly. "I know that ship, Admiral. I have faced it before." He paused and took a shaky breath. "I am one of the few who survived." Felt his confidence waver slightly. "What do you mean?" "Sit down, Admiral. Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you about the Battle of Crimson Nebula." 20 years. That was how long ago it had happened. Had been a young officer then, full of pride and hunger for glory. He had served on a raiding squadron of 50 warships, tasked with destroying a human refugee convoy. The convoy had been carrying survivors from a destroyed colony. 30 transport ships filled with families, children, and old people. They had no weapons. They could not fight back. It should have been easy. "We found them hiding in the Crimson Nebula," said, his voice growing distant as he remembered. 30 transport ships barely able to move. "We thought it would be simple slaughter." He shook his head slowly. "We were wrong." The Defiance had been there. Just one ship, standing guard over the helpless transports like a mother protecting her young. The squadron had laughed at the sight. 50 warships against one. The humans were insane. Then the battle began. "I have never seen anything like it," whispered. The human ship moved like nothing we had ever encountered. It was everywhere at once. It took hit after hit but kept fighting. Its weapons never stopped firing. Ship after ship exploded around us. They had expected the Defiance to retreat when the numbers became overwhelming. It did not retreat. They expected it to surrender when its shields failed and its hull began to burn. It did not surrender. It just kept fighting, kept killing, kept standing between thee and the helpless refugees behind it. "We destroyed 34 of our own ships trying to kill that one vessel," said. 34 ships and thousands of our people. And do you know what happened in the end? Was silent. "We ran," said simply. 50 ships attacked, 16 escaped, and the human refugees, all 30 transports survived, every single one, because one ship refused to let them die. Stood and walked to the window. Outside he could see the distant shape of the Defiance floating in the void. It looked smaller now, farther away, but somehow it also looked larger than before, more dangerous. "That was 20 years ago," said slowly. "Perhaps the ship has grown weak with age." "The ship has grown stronger," replied, "and its captain has grown wiser. That same ship fought at the station 3 years later. 100 enemy vessels surrounded a human space station for 3 days. The Defiance held them all back, alone. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the station intact and the enemy fleet scattered." His hands tightened into fists. "And then there was the Forge of Tears," continued. "A slave colony where captured humans were being held. The Defiance went in alone against a defensive fleet. It did not stop until every slave was free and the colony was nothing but burning wreckage." "Stories," growled. "Just stories told to frighten children." "Stories become legends for a reason, Admiral." Finally stood, his old bones creaking with the effort. "I have lived a long time. I have seen many battles, but I have never seen anything like that human ship. It does not fight like other vessels. It fights like something possessed. It fights like something that has forgotten how to die." The words hung in the air between them. Meanwhile, on the Defiance, the crew waited in tense silence. Chris Warren monitored the enemy fleet on his tactical display. Laura Kent paced slowly behind the captain's chair. Bell listened to the communication channels, picking up fragments of panicked chatter from the ships. "They are talking about us," reported. "Stories spreading through their fleet. They sound scared, Captain." Daniel Price nodded slowly. "They are remembering." "Remembering what?" Chris asked. "Every battle we have fought, every ship we have destroyed, every time we refused to retreat." Price turned to look at his young weapons officer. "We have been building our reputation for 15 years, Lieutenant. Today we find out if it was worth it." Laura moved to stand beside him. Do you think they will fight? Some might, Price admitted. There is always someone brave enough or foolish enough to test a legend, but the others, he shook his head. Fear spreads faster than courage, and right now their entire fleet is learning to be afraid. How do you know? Price smiled slightly. Because I would be afraid too if I were them. 200 ships sounds impressive until you realize that one of our ships has faced worse odds and won. Then you start to wonder if maybe you are the one who is outnumbered. On the flagship, Admiral returned to his bridge. His crew looked at him with desperate hope. They wanted orders. They wanted leadership. They wanted someone to tell them that everything would be fine, but had no words of comfort to give. His communication officer spoke up. Admiral, we are receiving reports from across the fleet. Many captains are requesting permission to fall back. They say their crews are unsettled. Unsettled, repeated bitterly. 200 warships, and they were unsettled by one enemy vessel. He looked at where the Defiance waited patiently. It had not moved. It had not fired. It simply existed, a silent threat hanging in the darkness. And that silence was more terrifying than any weapon. Hold position, ordered, but his voice lacked conviction. All ships hold position. He needed time to think. He needed time to find a way out of this situation without losing face. But deep down, he already knew the truth. The battle was already lost. It had been lost the moment the Defiance appeared. Now it was just a matter of time. The hours passed slowly. The fleet held its position, but it was no longer the confident armada that had arrived expecting easy victory. Ships drifted slightly out of formation. Communication channels buzzed with nervous chatter that officers could not silence. Fear had taken root, and it was growing stronger with every passing minute. Admiral sat in his command chair, watching the Defiance on his. The human ship had not moved. It simply waited, patient and silent, like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. Sub-Commander approached him carefully. Admiral, we have a problem. Another one did not turn to look at her. Several captains are reporting that their crews are refusing to follow orders. The men are talking about desertion. Some ships have already begun powering up their faster-than-light drives without authorization. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. They would flee from one ship. From that ship, Admiral, lowered her voice. I have spoken with some of the veterans in our fleet. They tell me that fighting the Defiance is not like fighting other human vessels. They say the ship is cursed. They say it cannot be killed. Superstition, spat. Foolish superstition. Perhaps, but superstition is guiding our fleet right now. Hesitated before continuing. Admiral, if you order an attack, I do not believe all our ships will follow. Some captains have already told me privately that they will not engage. Finally turned to face her. His 4 eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and something else, something that looked almost like defeat. What would you suggest, Sub-Commander? Chose her words carefully. A tactical withdrawal. We can tell command that we encountered unexpected resistance, that we chose to preserve our fleet for a more favorable engagement. She paused. It would not be a lie exactly. It would be running away. It would be surviving. On the bridge of the Defiance, Belle looked up from her communications station with a surprised expression. Captain, I am detecting something strange in the enemy fleet. What is it? Price asked. Movement. Several ships in the rear of their formation are turning away. Their engines are charging for faster-than-light travel. Laura Kent moved to look at the tactical display. She counted the moving ships quickly. 8 vessels. No, 10. They are leaving. Chris Warren grinned from his weapons station. They are running. They are actually running. Not running, Price corrected quietly. Not yet. Those are scouts and supply ships, the least committed vessels in their fleet, but it is a start. He watched the display carefully. Fear is contagious, Lieutenant. Once enough ships leave, the rest will follow. He was right. Within the next hour, more ships began to turn away, first in small groups of 2 or 3, then in larger numbers. The fleet was bleeding vessels like a wounded animal losing blood. Captains who had been eager for glory were now desperate to escape. Admiral watched it happen from his bridge. Each departing ship was another blow to his pride, another crack in his authority. He had led 200 warships to conquer a defenseless colony. Now his armada was falling apart without a single shot being fired. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we have lost 47 ships. They have jumped to faster-than-light travel without permission." Said nothing. 52 ships now, 58. Still nothing. Stepped closer. "Admiral, we need to make a decision. If we stay much longer, we will not have enough ships left to call this a fleet." Stood slowly. He felt older than he had ever felt before. He had spent his entire career building a reputation as a conqueror. Now that reputation was crumbling because of one human ship and the fear it inspired. "Open a channel to the Defiance," he ordered. The face of Captain Daniel Price appeared on the once again. He looked exactly as he had before, calm, confident, completely in control. If he was surprised that was calling him, he did not show it. "Admiral," Price said simply, "have you made your decision?" Forced himself to speak. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "The Dominion has decided that this colony is not worth the resources required for conquest. We have more important matters to attend to elsewhere. We are withdrawing our forces." It was a lie, and both of them knew it. But it was a lie that allowed to save some small piece of his dignity. Price nodded slowly. "A wise decision, Admiral. I hope you have a safe journey home." The transmission ended. Turn 2. Order all remaining ships to prepare for faster-than-light travel. We are leaving. The order spread through what remained of the fleet. Engines powered up. Navigation systems calculated escape routes. One by one, the warships turned away from New Avalon and the terrible vessel guarding it. On the Defiance, the crew watched in silence as the enemy fleet began to disappear. Ships vanished in flashes of light as they jumped to safety. The massive armada shrank rapidly until only a handful of vessels remained. Chris Warren stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "We did it. We actually did it. 200 ships and we never fired a single shot." "That was the point," Price said quietly. "The best victory is the one where nobody has to die." Laura moved to stand beside him. "How did you know they would run?" Price watched the last ships disappear. "Because I would have run too if I were them. They came here expecting to fight farmers and children. Instead they found us. And they remembered all the stories they had heard about what happens to people who fight this ship." He shook his head slowly. "No one wants to be the next story. No one wants to be the next lesson." Below them, on the surface of New Avalon, Governor Maria Santos was crying. She stood in her office watching her scanners as the fleet vanished one ship at a time. Her staff gathered around her, equally stunned. "They are leaving," someone whispered. "They are actually leaving." Maria activated her communication system with trembling hands. "USS Defiance, this is Governor Santos. I do not know how to thank you. You saved us. You saved all of us." Captain Price's voice came through the speakers, warm and gentle. "Just doing our job, Governor. Rest easy tonight. You are safe." Safe, Maria had never heard a more beautiful word. And in the cold darkness of space, the Defiance stood alone once more. Battle-scarred and silent, it had faced an army and made that army run. The legend had grown stronger. 3 days had passed since the fleet fled from New Avalon. The Defiance remained in orbit, standing guard over the colony while waiting for the relief fleet to arrive. The emergency was over, but Captain Price kept his ship ready for anything. He had learned long ago that peace could shatter without warning. The message from Earth Command came on the morning of the 3rd day. Laura Kent brought it to him personally. "Congratulations from the Admiral," she said, handing him the data pad. The relief fleet is 6 hours out, 12 ships in total, she smiled slightly. A bit late, but better than nothing. Price read the message quickly. They want us to remain on station until the fleet arrives, then proceed to 7 for maintenance and crew leave. He set the pad down. We have earned some rest. That we have. Laura hesitated. Daniel, the governor, has invited some of our crew to visit the surface. She wants to thank us in person. I think it would be good for morale. Price considered this. His crew had been through tremendous stress over the past few days. They had faced impossible odds and won without firing a single weapon. They deserved a chance to see what they had protected. Organize shore leave rotations, he said. Make sure we keep enough crew on board to respond to emergencies, but let everyone who wants to visit the colony have a chance. 2 hours later, the first shuttle landed on New Avalon's surface. Laura Kent led a group of officers through the main spaceport and into the town beyond. What they found there took their breath away. The streets were lined with people. Thousands of colonists had gathered to see the crew of the Defiance. They were cheering, waving, crying with joy. Children held up hand-drawn pictures of the ship. Old men saluted as the officers walked past. Women pressed forward to shake their hands and thank them. Chris Warren walked through the crowd with wide eyes. He had never experienced anything like this. I feel like we should have done something more, he murmured. We just stood there. We never even fought. We stood between them and death, Laura replied. Sometimes that is enough. A little girl broke free from her mother and ran toward them. She could not have been more than 7 years old, with brown hair and messy pigtails and dirt on her dress. She stopped in front of Laura and looked up at her with enormous eyes. Are you from the big ship? The girl asked. Laura knelt down to meet her gaze. Yes, I am. Were you scared? The question was so simple, so innocent. Laura thought about it carefully before answering. Yes, she admitted. I was scared, we all were. The little girl frowned. But you stayed anyway. Yes, we stayed anyway. Why? Laura smiled gently. Because being brave does not mean not being afraid. It means being afraid but doing the right thing anyway. And the right thing was to protect you and your family. The girl considered this with the seriousness that only children can manage. Then she threw her arms around Laura's neck in a fierce hug. Thank you for being brave, she whispered. Laura held her close, feeling tears prick at her eyes. This was why they did it. This was what made everything worth it. Back on the Defiance, Captain Price stood alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched out before him in endless patterns of light. Below, the blue and green world of New Avalon turned slowly in the void. 3 million people were down there, living their lives because his ship had been in the right place at the right time. The door behind him opened and Sam walked in. The navigation officer looked tired but content. Captain, the relief fleet has arrived. They are taking up defensive positions around the planet. Thank you, Lieutenant. Sam moved to stand beside him at the window. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. I have been in the fleet for 8 years. I have served on 4 different ships, but I have never seen anything like what happened here. Sam shook his head slowly. 200 warships ran away from us. They did not fight. They did not negotiate. They just ran. Does that surprise you? Honestly, yes. Sam turned to look at his captain. We are just one ship. How did we make them so afraid? Price was quiet for a long moment before answering. We earned it, Lieutenant. Every battle we fought, every enemy we faced, every time we refused to give up when common sense said we should, all of that built something. It built a reputation. It built a legend. He turned to face the young officer. They did not run from our weapons. They ran from what this ship represents. And what is that? A promise. Price's voice was firm and steady. A promise that humanity will never abandon its own. A promise that no matter how far you run, no matter how small your colony or how weak your defenses, someone will come for you. Someone will stand between you and the darkness." He gestured toward the planet below. "That is what we represent, not destruction, protection." Sam nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn on his face. So when they saw us, they did not just see a ship. They saw every story, every battle, every promise we have ever kept. And they decided they did not want to be the next story. The observation deck fell into comfortable silence. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance. The relief fleet moved into position, 12 ships forming a protective ring around New Avalon. But everyone knew the real protection had come from somewhere else. In the days and weeks that followed, the story spread across the galaxy. It traveled through trading posts and military bases, through diplomatic channels and underground networks. Everyone heard about what happened at New Avalon. One human dreadnought had faced 200 enemy warships, and the warships had fled without firing a shot. The tale grew with each telling. Some versions claimed the Defiance had mystical powers. Others said its captain had made deals with dark forces. But the truth was simpler and more powerful than any fantasy. The Defiance had earned its reputation through years of courage, sacrifice, and an unbreakable commitment to protecting the innocent. On distant worlds, young officers learned a new lesson that would shape their careers. They learned that numbers did not always equal victory. They learned that some enemies could not be measured by the size of their fleet. Most importantly, they learned never to underestimate a human who had something to protect. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the USS Defiance continued its eternal patrol. Battle-scarred and legendary, it carried the hopes of billions on its armored shoulders. Its crew stood ready for the next challenge, the next impossible battle, the next colony that needed saving. They were humanity's promise to the stars. And they would never break that promise.